18%. 18% is the increase in programmatic advertising revenue last year, according to PwC. 134.8 billion of programmatic revenue was generated in 2024 alone. The programmatic market is booming, publishers are drowning in complexity, privacy regulations shift monthly. And the biggest players are consolidating their buying power and squeezing out the competition. So, how can publishers navigate the new reality of digital advertising? I'm Benjamin Shapiro, and joining me today is Amanda Martin, the Chief Revenue Officer at Mediavine, the largest independent ad management firm in the US that helps publishers maximize revenue through advanced monetization and data solutions. And today, Amanda will reveal which strategies are actually working for publishers and how to future-proof your monetization stack in 2025. Amanda, welcome to the Martech podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you on the show. Excited to talk a little bit about programmatic media and publishers, how we all make money, the cash flowing through the advertising ecosystem. Let's start off with the obviously changing landscape. Artificial intelligence is coming online. There's always a turf war between DSPs and SSPs. Let's talk a little bit about the publishers first. Why are publishers slow to adapt to the changing infrastructure in the advertising landscape?
I think it's an excellent question. I'm not sure that I would categorize publishers as being slow. I would say they're methodical. And a lot of the changes and the ever fast paced scenario that we live in is that there's a lot of things to do and there's not as much capital behind the publisher's ability to do it. And so a lot of the times it's a let me see what I have to do versus what everyone is asking me to do. So I don't want to say that they're slow. I think they're methodical. I think they are picking their battles and trying to wait some of those battles out. But that obviously creates friction in any marketplace when the buyers are pushing for change, innovation, adoption.
Slow, methodical, potatical. Come on. They're not there's this difference in, like, how we think about artificial intelligence and, like, "I need to adopt it now. I need to move to AI first. I gotta change everything. My go-to-market's different," and, right, when we get down to revenue, when we get to the bottom of the funnel, how we actually make money through content, people are like, F it. Then it's not broken. Why am I changing anything?" Explain. The landscape is changing. How is it changing? And then why are we not sort of embracing, running towards the newer technologies?
Well, one, I think it's scary. Let's be honest. I think number two is that a lot of people's roles exist for the foundation and a structure that's been existing in our space for the past decade. And so adopting technology that may replace or adjust or shift someone's role at a company is a scary thing to ask someone to do. I think the fear is that yield is impacted and that the threat of trying something new may come at the expense of revenue. But I also think that there's just a lot of fluff around AI right now. There's a lot of conversations about companies claiming that they're doing amazing things with AI. And in the reality, the efficiency and revenue gains haven't really come to fruition if you're trying to do everything. And so I think publishers need to pick some battles and choose to take risks in a few calculated spots. They can't be left behind, but they also can't keep up with every headline and every opportunity that's being presented as like the next coming.
Tell me a little bit about what has changed, right? I think of programmatic in sort of the most layman's terms of, like, I've got a website, or let's go back to the blogging days. I've got a hole in my blog and somebody puts a, banner ad in the middle of it and I get paid for it. Obviously there's CCTV, CTV, podcasts, videos, all sorts of other channels where we're using programmatic to do not only media buying, but publishers are making money. What is the fundamental shift that is happening in the landscape?
I think the fundamental shift is there is a higher scrutiny and a higher level of efficiency that buyers are becoming incredibly focused on driving in their programmatic spend. Programmatic could be seen in the past as a little bit of an easy button and a scale play And now so much has shifted into programmatic pipes that the strategies coming in, and I think the technical know-how of the buy side has increased dramatically over the past 3 to 5 years. How they're assessing what they're buying, what they're saying is good versus what is bad is expanding. It's not just, do you hit a viewability threshold and is your site brand safe by a screenshot test? It's the ad experience, it's the time on site, it's the content that's surrounding the advertisements, it's the engagement, the attention metrics that are coming out. So it's just getting far more complex on how to be the inventory that a buyer wants. And because audio, podcasts, digital out of home, CTV has entered the equation, there's a lot more options vying for the same dollars that were going mainly to the web and display and online video to begin with.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is the dumb money is gone, and now the channel mix has expanded, and so it's not, my layman's explanation of programmatic of, like, the hole in my blog. Right now we're talking about digital billboards and my television and the equivalent of radio, like, that's all running through programmatic, and we have got more sophisticated on the buying side to understand not only is it showing up and is it safe, but is it actually working?
Correct.
All right. So tell me a little bit about the other side of the landscape where I think of it as the open web versus the walled gardens, your Googles and Meta of the world. Who's winning over publishers right now? Is it, going to everything else, or is it I'm just going to give my money to Google and Facebook?
I think the key is that Google and Facebook and the walled gardens in general have created a really great easy button and a really great insulated machine that produces results and reports out results in a really kind of clean and easy to understand way. Buyers definitely lean that way. Just look at how budgets are allocated across a digital spend, across programmatic versus open versus closed walled gardens. You're going to see more dollars going to the same spaces, but publishers win because at the end of the day, you hit a point of diminishing return. You can't just keep pumping more and more and more money into the same platform or the same network or the same website and expect to get the ROI that you need to produce for the brand or agency you're working for. And so I think while the open internet creates opportunity, scale, optionality, the walled gardens create consistent return on ad spend, consistent reporting that pays the dividends that they're looking for. And so it's a battle of attention, more so from the buyer's decisioning than it is from actual readers and visitors, because they're spread out pretty evenly across the two. The open internet tends to actually outpower the walled gardens when it comes to like share of voice and attention span, but the budgets do not get allocated in that same way.
It's funny because as you're describing why the Facebook and Meta ad platforms are so powerful, a big portion of it is because they show how much they've worked, right? It's there's a level of certainty which is like, here is my target. How many times did you hit it? But stop me if you've heard this one. Meta or Google uh, take credit for everything, right? Every conversion, they say that they are the ones that drove it because everybody uses the platforms and they have some sort of a view through metric. So somebody's been exposed to an ad, whether it was actually what was driving it. How much of this is the shell game between Google and Meta just saying, look, we can drop a pixel or expose everyone to some sort of an ad because they're all on our platforms. So when there's a conversion, we're going to raise our hand and say, we did that. And how much of it actually is the reporting is just that much better. So there's more certainty.
I was on the buy side for 8 years, and I will say that if you get a report that tells you the story that you wanna see at the end of the day, it does a lot, and it's really hard to move money away from that report, even if you question the validity of that report or the credit it's taking. I sometimes think that the best performance players in the space are just the best people at telling folks how good they are at it, and I would say that the open web or the non-walled gardens. I try to shy away from the open web since it's expanded so dramatically across all the different verticals, but they're really good at putting proof to their own pudding. And we have some things we could learn in that regard.
How much more reporting feature rich is the Googles and the Metas of the worlds compared to, what I would say is programmatic, but I mean the open web? Like, I haven't done a ton of programmatic advertising, uh, recently, enough to be dangerous, but I always am like, I cannot tell what is actually performing. How much farther behind is programmatic relative to Google and Meta now as opposed to where they were, like, a year or 2 ago?
I don't know that we're any further behind. I think the same challenge we face a challenge that they do not face, which is our success is tied to multiple platforms, multiple media outlets, multiple reporting dashboards. Their success is tied to one platform, one reporting output. And so there's not the complexity to tie the narrative together and the story together. And so at the end of the day, I have found that the easy button normally wins. And so the programmatic space is trying to do a better job of fulfilling that kind of easy button, full printout, full reality of what you're driving. But it does take a lot of sophistication. And I will say I'm impressed to see more of that knowledge and sophistication transfer over to the buy side, where it was kind of all powered on the sell side to begin with. I think DSPs are doing a better job of advocating for their ad spend. And I think they truly are seeing themselves competing with the walled gardens as opposed to competing with themselves. I think you hear that narrative and people kind of balk at it or question it. But the reality is, when a brand is making a decision on where to put budgets, they are not necessarily focusing as much on is it Trade Desk or is it Amazon or is it Google? They're focused on is it Facebook? Is it TikTok? Is it programmatic? And so the fight's the very beginning of the decision making.
I hear you, but I think what the actual, like, logic going through the buyer's head is, "I'm gonna run a campaign in Meta, and I'm gonna run one in the open web." And Meta's saying I've got a $4 cost per acquisition, the open web is saying I have a $12 cost per acquisition. The $4 cost per acquisition is gonna help me keep my job. And it might be that Meta is taking credit, or Google, or, whichever walled garden you're talking about, is taking credit for what the actual open web spend is doing, but the $4 CPA makes me look good, so I'm gonna just invest into this. And
Well,
so part of
yeah.
it is, and that's the fundamental problem with, like, that you mentioned, it's you've got multiple dashboards and multiple platforms that you're trying to weave data together to get this picture of what's actually working, and so it's harder to be like, "Yep, we get credit for all of that." On the flip side, I wanna talk a little bit about the revenue strategies. When you're a publisher and you're starting to think about, well, where should I open up my inventory? Should I be putting the hole in the website or my digital billboard? Should I be offering it to a walled garden? Should I be offering it to programmatic advertising? Tell me which revenue strategies are actually working for publishers these days.
I think the revenue strategy is definitely from the programmatic space when it comes to monetizing your owned and operated property. I think the attention fight is across the social platforms, across how you're driving people to your owned and operated experience, because you have the most opportunity to monetize your content within your own four walls. I think the challenge is you have to be everywhere else in order to drive people to those four walls, and AI is the thing that is disrupting that discovery the most. So for me, the battle between walled gardens and programmatic for a publisher is attention, not necessarily ad monetization. Once they get someone to their site, we know how to create the right monetization strategy and we know how to make the most out of that visit. The challenge today is getting the person to the site.
Yeah, that's interesting because I was thinking you're going down the path of saying, well, if you sell direct, you're going to get more money, and programmatic will help you fill, help you sell all of your inventory. That's always been the dynamic for me, thinking about podcast advertising is, if I want to go out and sell it, I could sell it for 10x what I would on a programmatic exchange, our inventory. But do I actually want to go out, and do I want ads that are somebody else's ads in my podcast? That's always been the trade-off. And you're saying that The issue is actually driving the traffic, right? Now the problem isn't that, hey, how do I figure out who the buyers are? It's the traffic is going away. That has to be an AI thing. Am I right?
Absolutely correct. How consumers are discovering content is wildly different generationally, and then AI only multiplies that difference.
Yeah, so we talk about this all the time with the brand focused work that we do on the podcast, which is your SEO strategy is dying, but your content is still useful. You just need to make sure that the LLMs are digesting it and prioritizing you. So now we went from bots crawling for SEO to AEO or GEO or whatever EO we're calling it. Um, how is it affecting the programmatic landscape? There are no more clicks, there are no more site visits, there is no more people coming to the site, so the revenue is gone? Is it that simple?
I think at the bottom line, that's the pain that's felt is like less traffic equals less opportunity to monetize. I think the larger challenge is you don't have the ability to be one of many. You have to have your own brand. You have to have your own established audiences in order for AI to acknowledge your validity as a trusted source and as what they're going to put forward. It's a double-edged sword. AI is discovering you and scraping you, but they're not sending traffic back to you. So it really is kind of a protect your assets, but then also push to change that narrative. Do they pay me to scrape my site, or do they pay me to show my content and push traffic to me? I think we have a lot of innovation to come in that space. I think the double-edged sword is content has never been more accessed with the innovation of AI, yet the folks creating that content have never been in more of a conundrum of how they actually stand up that business.
I was reading yesterday, I think it was Yahoo and Reddit and a few other large entities are getting together and essentially saying you have to pay us to crawl our content. And now they're essentially creating a standard that's trying to extract revenue from the AI crawlers, right? And giving the revenue back to the publishers. How do you think that whole turf war is going to shake out? Is ChatGPT and OpenAI gonna start paying a fraction of a penny every time they crawl and extract content from a website? Is it when they're quoting a website? Walk me through the dynamic there between an LLM and a publisher.
So what's interesting is that you outlined actually a few different monetization strategies that you could pay to crawl, you could pay to show results, you could pay to send someone through, like a pay-per-click type situation. There's a lot of different kind of proposed commercial structures. At scale, they don't exist yet, but the key is that publishers have to hold the key to their content in order to have that marketplace have to exist. The reason why LLMs have become so popular and have grown so quickly and so many of them are popping up every single day is that there is no barrier to entry to get the content. And so if publishers work together to create that barrier of entry, a marketplace will be created just like Google created in order to send traffic, in order to get the results they needed. It was a win-win. Right now, there isn't a win-win on both sides, but I think a commercial model is definitely on the horizon. We're just only seeing that really be successful at the really top tier publishers who have that kind of demand naturally because of their brand recognition. So access will be the key for publishers to control who can and who can't. And do you pay me in order to get access to my content? Or do you send me traffic? It's a trade-off.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is the New York Times is so reputable that an LLM scraping their content basically creates liability, and the New York Times is like, "No, you have to pay us to access our content." But benjshap.com and martechpod.com and iheareverything.com, are smaller sites that are our owned properties. Like, OpenAI is not paying us and to crawl our content. So let's say the Martech podcast as an example, like we've got 2,000 pages and podcasts all over the place, and we do YouTube videos and we have our blog. How do I think about monetization across this multimedia landscape that we're, contributing in, knowing that we're a small fish in a ocean.
Yeah, I think ultimately Mediavine kind of plays a role in that, which is if you take a lot of small domains that don't have that ability to go straight to OpenAI, you create a network that OpenAI wants access to. We've also seen that once you block them from crawling your site, you actually get a response from them that, "Oh, we wanted that content. We need access to that content." It competitively disadvantages us to not have it if somebody else has it. And so I think it's we gotta lock the door and they have to come knocking for it if that's gonna be the commercial model, or they're gonna have to decide to send traffic. Either one may work in the long run. I just think we're at the infancy of publishers actually gaining those controls or those standards to do something about it. Cloudflare rolled out their pay to crawl. It it had the pay to crawl piece hasn't come to fruition yet, it's in an early beta, but the ability to block every single crawler from coming to your site now exists, and so I think it's just the first step of creating doors and barriers that businesses have to walk through from a monetization standpoint.
That seems so inherently risky for the publisher to say, you know what? I'm just going to cut off access to my content because I want to be paid for my content. But without an audience, I don't have anything to sell. And so there's the balance there of take OpenAI and GPT as the example. I'm just going to stop the GPT crawler from going to my website. Now you guys can't crawl my site. Well, how are people going to find my content? Like obviously I have some small audience, but I want it to be bigger and everybody's going to the LLM. So aren't you cutting off your nose to spite your face if you restrict access from LLMs?
I think the key is that we're not at a place where LLMs are funneling traffic at any high velocity that you're actually cutting off a revenue opportunity at this point. You're still getting the majority of your traffic from search or from a social media platform or from your own efforts of your brand equity from people revisiting your site or your newsletters. So diversification is really the key. A lot of publishers found themselves in a place where 80% of their traffic came from Google search. That's not the place you're gonna wanna be at the end of the next year, 6, 9 months. You wanna be in a place where you have a lot of different traffic sources so that you're not relying on one traffic source. We're seeing LLMs come in at a small percentage of overall traffic to our network in the sense of who they actually send. If they start sending traffic and we can monetize in the same way that we monetize Google search traffic, we're right back in the same marketplace we live in. The reality is that that's not how LLMs function.
Yeah, they don't send the
They're not
traffic. They just
sending
deliver the
anyone.
content and people consume it and move on.
Yeah, and so I think the marketplace will need to shift. Right now, our publishers are sitting in a world where they're in both worlds at the same time. They're in SEO isn't done. They still live in a world of SEO. Now they're adapting to a world of GEO. They're adapting to a world of diversification. It just makes the job a lot harder for publishers.
Do you think there's any possibility for the LLMs to actually be monetized by publishers? Like, is there going to be some sort of an ad-driven model, right? Google, hey, it's, this search crawl. Well, all right, all the links became monetized, right? They were all paid advertising. Do you see a model for LLMs to start monetizing their services through advertising, or are we just going to be paying for tokens and subscriptions and access?
I think CTV is a really great example of how this market shapes out. I think you watched a lot of SVOD models come into place and create the infancy of their dominance in streaming, and then you watched AVOD become their next phase of scale and ability.
Define SVOD and AVOD
So
for us.
so subscription versus advertising. So if you're a subscription model, everyone's paying to gain access, and then once they're in, there's no advertising or minimal advertising. AVOD is I am purely, living off of advertising as my
The
monetization.
subscription versus the free tier is essentially
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yep, exactly, and you've seen the likes of Netflix go from pure subscription to a balance of both, and I think the reality is that advertising is the commerce that we are all playing in. It's the attention economy is paid by the brands that need to get in front of the consumers that they're looking to advertise looking to reach. Um, I've predicted for a while that there's a world where advertising in some context slowly becomes how LLMs support themselves, because the infrastructure of an agent is not one to balk at. And while a lot of them have a lot of cash right now, they'll have to create profit in the run at their first 5 to 10 years in order to cover all those expenses. And so advertising tends to be the place that attention gets monetized.
All right, Amanda, I'm going to move on to our lightning round where I'm going to ask you some questions around the state of media and publishing. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Question number one. Who is winning the never ending turf war between DSPs and SSPs?
Depends on the day and the headline, but I think ultimately it's gonna be brands' affinity of what path they choose and what relationship they value the most. I think in a perfect world, neither one wins over the other, that there's a balance of both. But I definitely think the SSP market is commoditized and that not all will win. My concern is that will the DSPs take out the advocates of the publishers? And so we have an arm in both fights, and I would say that directness is going to win in the end, and I think DSPs and SSPs alike will win in that battle.
All right. So it's always confusing to me to define what the DSPs and the SSPs do. There's the supply side, and you're saying that's been commoditized. So there's not a huge difference between who you're selling your ad inventory through. You didn't say that the buy side was commoditized. Who are the players, and what are some of the differences between them on the DSP side?
Well, on the DSP side, you have obviously the incumbent, which is Google. You have the successful independent, which is the Trade Desk. You have the challenger, which is Amazon, and I would say I wouldn't bet against Amazon in any race. And then you have kind of some of the long-standing, the Yahoos of the world. You have the Basis, you have the Viants, and then you have the niche DSPs, which is actually something that's expanding rather than retracting. Instead of them saying, "Oh, there's a fight with 5 clear, front runners," there's actually been a lot of development in niche vertical specific DSPs where the buying is very specific to the vertical of advertiser they serve, which is actually a nice expansion for us to see, because publishers getting revenue from more than a few sources is a safer space for us.
Give me some examples of niche DSPs.
If you look at the buying pattern of like a Pulse Point, which is an SSP slash like DSP experience, you're going to see a ton of pharma come through. You're going to see a ton of specific vertical spend. If you look at a Viant, you're going to see a lot of local, regional, independent agency spend come through those pipes. So spend you're not competing for necessarily somewhere else. And then the reality is that no buyer is only buying in one seat. And so you have a lot of revenue coming from 4 to 5 to 10 DSPs all at the same time. So it definitely diversifies where you're getting your paycheck.
We talked a lot about the programmatic advertising landscape for the publishers. I want to focus on the brand. What's the one thing a brand can do to optimize a programmatic campaign?
I think it's the focus on a true KPI. I think from my experience on being on the buy side myself, there's a lot of bells and whistles when you get into programmatic, and a lot of those North Stars contradict each other. So I would say having a solid definition of what defines your return on ad spend, what metric is your most important metric, and driving to that across any platform that you're buying, and really following the performance and following the audience.
I'm going to press you on this one. Yeah, having a KPI across any advertising strategy matters. But with programmatic specifically, I feel like it's so technically complicated to implement. What are some of the optimization tactics that are specific to programmatic other than, well, you have to know what you're aiming at? It's like, how do you make sure that you're targeting? How do you make sure that your data is flowing? Because that seems to be the biggest problem for this channel.
I think the key to that is you have to get out of the kind of media vanity metrics pretty quickly, and you need to get back to your business metrics. I think the reason we're seeing such success in the retail media network space is that you're speaking about bottom line items sold as opposed to what is my CTA or my CTR. And so I think you have to get past the vanity metrics in order to like solidify your success. And I think you're seeing that happen in a lot of different ways. You're seeing it happen with retail media networks, you're seeing it with offline data sources, you're seeing it with curators now. But at the end of the day, when you can get your CFO to actually care about the KPIs of your campaign, I think you're winning.
All right, you're going to like this next question. Here's $10 million. How are you going to allocate it in a programmatic budget in 2025?
Give it all to us. I'm just kidding. I would
Ah,
I would say pick the right DSP for what you're looking to drive and what your level of sophistication is. Secondly, I would say lean into the tech, lean into the learnings, lean into the insights, lean into the algorithms because at the end of the day, if your buying is so fixed at the beginning of the process, you're not using any of the bells and whistles that programmatic has to showcase to you who your actual audience is or where you're actually driving results. My favorite thing from being on the buy side was when you met with a brand who defined who they were going after and who they win with. And then your campaign showed the exact opposite of what the result was. Learn from your DSP and learn from the insights you can glean.
I'm going to ask you a reframing of this question, which I like better.
Okay.
I've got 10 million bucks.
Okay.
That sounds way better. What should I do with it if I'm going to invest in programmatic? I'm running a media production company. I'm targeting podcast media creators and producers. How do I get in front of them? Am I podcasting? Am I, using video? Am I going display? Which channels? What should I do?
So your definition of your audience is what?
We sell infrastructure to podcast producers, software.
Do you have a good handle on where they are at?
Absolutely not. They
Absolutely
go
not.
they go to podcast movement. They
Okay.
go to events and that's pretty much what I know.
All right. I would say try to find try to assume where your audience is going to go and measure performance. Secondarily, I would say gain access to a list of who those people actually are
Sure.
and utilize that to spend your dollars.
Yep.
Drive the audience first. So on the programmatic side of things, which is really one of my biggest aha moments when I transferred from the buy side to the sell side, was on the sell side, everyone's focused on their content and why their readers come to them, and on the buy side, everyone's focused on the audience and where they are. And so if you can define your audience, even if it's with a seed piece of information, I would model off of a seed and then I would spend wherever that insight in your DSP tells you to spend. And it may surprise you. You may not actually spend as much on podcasts as you think you would to reach that audience that leans into that space. You probably are spending a lot on the open web, quite frankly, with video. And then you're probably expanding into audio and you may expand into CTV, but you probably are looking at too niche of an audience to go that big for those CPMs. But I'd say get a seed audience of who your current customers are, lookalike model, expand it, buy third party data, and let the algorithm find your audience.
If I had $10 million in budget, should I actually invest it in programmatic advertising or should I be putting it in my pocket?
That's a good question. I think define what your return on ad spend is and then figure out if $10 million is a risk or a reward. It sounds like a very, very small audience that you're looking to get in front of. So I'd say $10 million sounds like a lot could go wrong. And so I would pace it out. I would do a lot of smaller versions of that budget, trying and testing. And then when you find a recipe that works, then invest the rest of the dollars.
All right, last question for you. What's the hardest question publishers are asking about programmatic advertising today?
I think the hardest question is how do I get my traffic and how do I save my traffic? It's the hardest question because it's a moving target and there's no easy answer for it. The days of how do I get more traffic was play the SEO game and show up in results and perform. It's just a big open-ended question right now. And so I think the hardest question anyone can ask me is one that there's not a definitive answer for. And so when they ask that question, it really goes away from how to drive traffic and it's how to drive your brand, which can be a hard thing when you're looking at revenue declines of average 25% because your traffic is just physically disappearing month over month.
It's a changing landscape. Artificial intelligence is not only changing about how brands are thinking, but also the economics of being a publisher and creator. A lot of the media sources which we rely on to reach our customers are shifting, and some of them are getting smaller. Some of them are obviously figuring it out and benefiting from AEO and GEO. Just like with everything else in artificial intelligence and this sort of new wave of the world, it's a new landscape, and I appreciate you coming on the podcast and telling us a little bit about what life is like for our publishing friends.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, that wraps up this episode of the Martech Podcast. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Amanda Martin, the Chief Revenue Officer at Mediavine. If you'd like to contact Amanda, you can find a link to her LinkedIn profile in our show notes or on martechpod.com, or you can visit her company's website, which is mediavine.com. If you haven't subscribed yet and you want a daily stream of marketing and technology knowledge in your podcast feed, hit the subscribe button in your podcast app or visit us on YouTube, and we'll be back in your feed next week. All right, that's it for today. But until next time, my advice is to just focus on keeping your customers happy.